Mike Renick. I'm with Team Renick Real Estate Services. I'm the senior broker and the team lead for our real estate team. We are part of Keller Williams on the Water, and we service the west coast of Florida. This is a special event. This is our first time. We're going to do multiple series, but this is the Team Renick Live series. And what we will do is we're going to, over time, walk through the entire buyer process and give you information from the experts. So the nice thing is you won't have to sit here and listen to me or each of them. We're going to have the experts, and we have a great one lined up this morning. I'll introduce in just a minute. We're going to do another one called Mike's Market Update. That'll be another weekly update, and you'll learn more about different markets here, the Sarasota market, the Longboat, Venice, and so on. We're going to introduce a new thing like Mike's How-To series, and we're going to talk about things like Alexa. How do we leverage the new technologies out there? I am a retired IT guy from General Motors, and I have a passion for that, so we'll share some of that. And one of the ones I'm really excited about, in addition to all of these, will be Mike introduces Longboat. So we're going to meet business owners. We're going to go to the parks and film them live. We're going to meet the city council, the mayor, the power behind the scenes. We're going to cover everything. So whatever you'd like covered, feel free to send me an email at mike@teamrenick.com. Just a little background. I came here with Eric Teo, who's my broker partner, about 8 years ago. We got here at the end of 2010. We came down to do real estate differently. We promised transparency, full exposure to everything. We promised a small brokerage with a high touch to our clients. It worked. Last year, near the end of the year, 4 national brokerages came after us. We looked at the proposals. Actually, we merged with Keller Williams on the Water because they share the same ideals we do. It's all about a win-win. It's about high ethics. Just real quickly, ethics is defined in my mind as doing the right thing, even when you know no one is watching. So that's about us. Our efforts continue to grow. We service more customers. It's about the boutique service. It's the high touch. It's the service we think you deserve as a buyer or seller. We'll share more about that in another series. All right, today we're going to talk about the earnest money deposit. When you write a contract in Florida and it becomes executed, in other words, the seller and the buyers agree, it's customary for a buyer to provide consideration. And I use that instead of the term money because it can be other things, and we'll talk about that today. But my guest today is Michael Hankin. He's an attorney with the law firm of Hankin & Hankin. Mr. Hankin practices primarily in the area of residential and commercial real estate transactions. He is an approved agent for the Chicago Title Insurance Company, Attorney's Title Insurance Fund, and the Old Republic Title Insurance Company. And he's been designated as a board-certified real estate attorney. That's the highest level of recognition you can be awarded by the Florida Bar. He regularly represents buyers, sellers, and lenders in all aspects of real property transactions. Mr. Hankin grew up in Sarasota, attended Riverview High, and then went on to Emory University, where he received his Bachelor of Business Administration degree, and then Wake Forest University, where he obtained his Juris Doctorate degree. Now, that's the formal aspect that my team provided for me to talk about Michael. What I'd like to share is our relationship goes back about 8 years ago. We were with another brokerage at the time. The brokerage was disintegrating. Michael reached out and gave us a safe haven to really what turned into launching our own real estate efforts under Eric and myself. We weren't brokers at the time. So in addition to all those things, Mike is very active in the community. He's a great personal friend. And as far as I'm concerned, he's a leading attorney in Sarasota. I have one goal with attorneys. I love them as friends, but I hope never to be in trouble and have to use them professionally. So what I'd like to do right now, and this is our first session, our first seminar, so some things may go wrong. I've got a lot of buttons in front of me. I'm going to try to click right now and bring Michael in. There he is. Michael, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very excited to have you here. This is our first Team Renick live show. I can't think of a more renowned, more knowledgeable, I hope Shannon's not listening to this, more personable guest to have on here. Shannon is Michael's wife. They're 2 top attorneys and they're part of Hankin & Hankin. We will feature Shannon in some subsequent episodes here. I'm really excited about that. But Michael, we're here to talk about the earnest deposit process. Why don't you go ahead?
Yes, first, thank you so much for having me here today. I think this is a great platform and really just a great idea. and really indicative of how you run your team. You're always looking for something new and something different and what's cutting edge. And you do that not only in your own business, but also for your clients. So really keep up the good work. Kind of the meat and bones, we're talking a little about escrow deposits today. And so the first question that comes up is, what really is an escrow deposit or an earnest money deposit? And it's money that's given to a third party, an escrow agent, by the buyer, which shows the buyer's willingness and ability to perform under a contract. They range, we see them from 1% up to 10% of the purchase price, but typically they're 3 to 5% of the purchase price.
Michael, who would hold the earnest deposit or the escrow deposit?
Sure. So in Sarasota and Manatee County, it's typically the buyer who pays for the escrow agent services and also selects the escrow agent. That escrow agent is also typically the title agent in the deal, which means that person is checking the public records to make sure the title to the property is good, that there's no unexpected liens or encumbrances or restrictions, encroachments into setbacks. Really anything that can go wrong with your title is what that person is doing and taking care of. I may be a little bit biased, but I believe that person should always be a board certified real estate attorney. There's a common misconception that real estate attorneys and real estate transactions are more expensive than title companies. And that's just not the case. Most board certified real estate attorneys are the same price or less expensive than title companies. And you get an expert to check your title and make sure this investment that you're investing in actually has good and clear title, and you'll be able to sell it in the future. And so we always think your escrow agent should be a board certified real estate attorney, because that person's also your title agent and also on your side, making sure you don't have problems down the road.
So this is a very important part of the purchase sell process. Now, given the amount of money that's involved, and you shared some percents just a couple of seconds ago, is the deposit ever at risk? How does that work? If I back out of a deal and I'm a buyer, do I lose my deposit, or are there some things where I would get it back, and how does that work?
Sure. Great question. Really very deep question. So generally, there's two different types of purchase contracts that are used in Florida for residential transactions. There's an as-is form as well as a repair limit form. The as-is form, if that's utilized, has typically a 15-day inspection period where a buyer can come in and cancel the transaction for any reason within those 15 days. If they do that, then they receive a refund of that escrow deposit and they go on their way. If they use the other form, which is the repair limit contract form, they don't have an unqualified right to receive it back if they don't like their inspection. Instead, a seller is given an option to fix and repair things. And if they do, they can keep the buyer in the contract despite their inspection results. That would be a great topic for a future show. There's so many differences between the various forms of contract that we would love to get into that and really delve into all the nitty-gritty details.
So, Michael, if I'm the buyer and I put in a $20,000 deposit, and during the 15 days that you talked about and the as-is contract for the inspection, I just decide this deal isn't right for me, and I decide to back out, I notify my broker that that's the case, do I automatically get my deposit back, or are there some things that can happen to make it a little tricky?
So it's an interesting dichotomy between what the contract contemplates, what the contract thinks is going to happen, and what actually happens in practice. What the contract says is that if you cancel within those 15 days, that you get your deposit back. That's that, and no problem at all. In practice, most escrow agents, title companies won't release the deposit unless they have something signed by both the buyer and seller in writing. So practically, you don't really get it back until the buyer and seller both sign off on it. Legally, under the contract, you're entitled to it once you send your notice. But an interesting practical question. The contract says how things are supposed to happen, but it doesn't always in practice happen that way.
So let me bring up another example. That was a great answer, Michael. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm applying for a mortgage, and we all know how we love to go through the underwriting process when we apply for a mortgage. And something happens, and at the end of the process, I get denied. What happens with my deposit at that point?
Interesting question. So if you have a financing contingency under the contract, let's just assume all the default boxes are checked. You would have 30 days to obtain a commitment. At the end of those 30 days, you've either obtained your commitment, which waives that contingency, or you haven't and you've issued a cancellation notice. If you haven't issued the cancellation notice, it also waives the contingency. So if you're outside of your first 30 days and you haven't noticed the seller that you're canceling because you haven't gotten your financing together, then the contract is no longer contingent on financing. What it is still contingent on, assuming you have a financing contingency, is property-related conditions of the property not meeting the bank's requirements. So let's say a roof was actively leaking and it was noted in the appraisal. The bank's going to say, hey, we're not lending money secured by that property. That would be a contingency that would allow their buyer to get their money back. Or it can also be the appraisal not coming in. So if the appraisal doesn't come in at the right value and the buyer and seller are unable to reach a new agreement on price, then that would also be another instance which the buyer can receive their money back.
Michael, you have a great way of explaining things. Thank you. I appreciate that. So what we've done is talked about the legalities, the structure of the contract, things like that. Let's step back now and talk about strategic from a business perspective. So if we're working with buyers, there's three prices out there that are important. It's the selling price, what it's listed at, the market price, and if you are working with a good broker, they will calculate that and show you the data, what the market price is for that home or condominium or land. And the third price is the buyer desire. So let's say we're going to come in with something less than seller desired and less than market. Does it make any sense? Is our offer perceived a little bit stronger with a larger earnest deposit than a smaller one?
Sure, absolutely. The more money that's put up as a deposit, the stronger that looks to a seller. The seller says, okay, this buyer can perform. One interesting thing about the deposit is it also typically acts as the measure of damages for a buyer. So what that means is if a buyer doesn't perform, they get to the closing date, they don't have any contingencies left, they're unable to cancel, and they just can't close. Either they just didn't have the money they expected to have, they thought another sale was going to go through, or whatever. A buyer doesn't perform. Typically, that deposit acts as the measure of damages, what they lose if they don't perform. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Yes, a buyer's offer is stronger with a higher deposit, but if they don't go through with the deal, they have more at risk.
Excellent answer. Thank you. I really appreciate that. One fact that I really like being a licensed real estate broker in the state of Florida is we don't take deposits up front anymore. I know when I worked in Michigan, it was customary when my buyer wrote an offer, they would write a check with a deposit. And those always made me nervous because you have so many days it's got to get in the broker's hands and into the escrow account and all that. Down here, though, what we leverage all the time is the fact that when there's an offer and negotiation, we always put in the offer that the deposit will be wired within 3 or 5 business days. So there's really nothing at risk during the negotiation. The buyer doesn't write a check, doesn't provide cash, any of that kind of stuff. So what we've covered today is the legalities, and Michael, just a fantastic job taking a complex topic and making it much more easier to understand. But I would encourage you, if you're using another broker and you're a buyer, to make sure you leverage it strategically, because it's that number on the sheet of paper that shows how serious you really are. So if we're coming in with a below market offer and we put a good deal as a deposit, again, not due until the contract is what we call executed. That's one of those legal words that I do understand. In other words, both sides have signed and they have copies. See, I remember my classes. And then the clock ticks and when the deposit is due. So there's a lot of things involved with this topic, but it's something that can be strategic, but every buyer and seller needs to know the ins and the outs, and especially the buyer, the risks associated with that. Does that make sense, Michael?
It does. Yeah, I think that's a good summation.
Michael, I want to say thank you for the very first appearance on Team Renick Live. I mean, I can't think of a better person. You've meant so much to Eric and I as we've grown our business. You created the environment. You were there late nights when we had questions. You were there early in the morning when we had questions then. But it was just great working with you in the past. That relationship will continue as we go forward, because you're one of the folks that we've met down here that have the same feel towards their client. Customer experience is important. And we just appreciate your approach to business, and I want to thank you for coming on here today.
I really appreciate you having me. Being any portion of your success has really been a privilege, and it's really been amazing to watch you guys come into town and build this practice, and to the level that you've grown it to and the time you have is just amazing. So keep up the great work, and I'm happy to be a part of the team.
Thank you, Michael. Going forward, our next live episode will be on Wednesday morning, 10 o'clock daylight time, Eastern Daylight Time. Greg Owens will be our guest there. We're very lucky to have guests. Not only is he the broker operating partner of Keller Williams on the Water, he is the president of our board of realtors of RASM. And I'm not going to pretend that I can take that acronym and dissect it into what it is. Michael, help me with RASM, R-A-S-M.
The Realtor
putting you on the spot.
Association of Sarasota and Manatee.
Thank you. I liked it when it was SARS, that one I could do. But so Greg will be our guest next Wednesday morning, 10 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. I will publicize when we're going to get the other live sessions going forward. But I want to thank everyone. We'll post this on the Facebook pages and the websites and YouTube channels for future reference. Hopefully you find the information provided today some help. Michael, thank you for everything.
Thanks, Mike.